let's just start with the 1MDB first. Now, you know that 1MDB is a strategic investment fund. It's not really an investment fund per se, in the sense that there's excess money in the government, and the government gave them, a couple of billion to spend. That's not the case. You really have to get to grips with the fundamental issue, which is they borrowed money. This is a fund built on borrowed money. And the way they borrowed it is quite simple. They go to the bank and they say, I need a couple of $1 billion. And so, do you have a business model? No, I don't. Then how are we going to give you the money? The government is going to guarantee it. So basically, it's based on the government guarantee, and they were able to borrow about 4%, 5%. And implicitly, explicitly, the government guarantees the fund. Now, if you run such a fund, a strategic fund of this nature, the first order of business is to make sure that you buy assets that gives you better return than 4 to 5%. So you can service the least you can do is service your interest and make sure you get the return back. That hasn't happened. They went and borrowed up to 11.6 billion US dollars or 42 billion ringgit. They bought a lot of assets. They bought land. There's nothing strategic about land unless you're in Hong Kong. Malaysia's got ample land. They bought a lot of land. They bought government land at very low prices. This is the irony. Government land they bought at very low prices, and then they revalued this land in order to pad up their investment portfolio. Okay? But when they come to buying land from private citizens or private individuals, they paid 2 times or 3 times market rate. They also went to buy the power plants, independent power plants, right, in Malaysia. They bought 2, but they were very old. These power plants had like 3 to 4 years left in their lifespan. And most power plants last for 21 years, which is basically the power purchasing agreement. So they bought very old power plants. They paid double for that. All these are available online, not from bloggers and stuff. You can actually read all the financial reports from companies that covered this issue. Now, so they bought land and they bought power plants. The rest, we don't know what they bought. So The Edge, which is a reputable financial paper in Malaysia, they have a paper in Singapore as well, did a lot of research on this matter, and it's better to quote them, otherwise I'll get sued. The Edge has reported that there's somewhere between 17 billion ringgit to 25 billion ringgit is unaccounted for. They cannot produce an asset to match those investments. So that is the hole. That is the real story on 1MDB. This massive hole, 42 billion in debt, of which missing assets are 25 billion. Now, how does this relate to the recent story about the bank account? Now, I want to take you back a bit to a week ago, last week, when a Swiss guy with the name of Javier Justo was arrested in Koh Samui. I'm sure some of you might have read about this. Now, he worked for a company called Petro Saudi. Now, Petro Saudi was a company that did the very first 1MDB deal. Now, I'll tell you this story to illustrate to you what actually goes on in the micro level, other than the macro picture of them, not being able to produce assets to support what their borrowings. The Petro Saudi deal is a joint venture. In the simplest term, Petro Saudi claims to have assets in Turkmenistan and Argentina. 1MDB had $1 billion to spend, right? They formed a new joint venture company. We call it a NewCo, and someone put in the assets, and the other guy put in the cash. And 1MDB is supposed to get 40% out of this deal, and 60% remains with Petro Saudi. This deal was signed. The company was formed 10 days before signing, right? In the deal, and because I'm a corporate lawyer, I read it, I nearly fell off laughing. The audacity of the deal. There was no financial or legal due diligence attached. There was no references to anything of that sort. There's no valuation report on what the value of the Turkmenistan or Argentina oil fields are, right? So what you had was a transaction that looked very strange, rushed through, and in addition to everything else, Petro Saudi pumped in $700 million into this company just before signing. And once the $1 billion went in, the NewCo, the new company with the $700 million had to repay it back to Petro Saudi. So basically, they devised a way to remove this money, pushing the money within a few days and then removed it immediately. So that's what we saw. And the audacity of the agreement requested 1MDB to do a valuation report on the Turkmenistan and Argentina assets within 3 days of signing. They are putting $1 billion. The guy who is pushing these assets has not produced a report, and the buyer, the guy who's coming in to buy a stake, has to produce a valuation report within 3 days. I don't think you can fly to Turkmenistan to actually look at the assets within 3 days. What less than produce a report? So what we saw is this: a really dodgy deal at many levels with very questionable terms, and that, my friends, is the first ever 1MDB deal, and that was in 2009. What has occurred since then, we have no idea. We know about the land use, we know about the power plants. What the rest of it, the 25 billion question mark, the 17 billion to 25 billion question mark, remains unknown. Now, let's fast forward now to Javier's arrest. As I said earlier, this director of PetroSaudi. Now he's been, the news has been covering him as an opportunistic blackmailer that is trying to blackmail PetroSaudi for another 10 million ringgit. His severance pay to leave PetroSaudi was 15 million ringgit. That's quite substantial. On current exchange rate is about $3 million US. He was paid to leave the company. Now, the story is Javier then took this bunch of documents and gave it to Sarawak Report. And Sarawak Report has been giving these documents to other reporters. And in the latest issue, Sarawak Report worked with the Asian Wall Street Journal on the expose. Now, Sarawak Report is run by a really tenacious woman. Her name is Claire Brown. She's the sister-in-law of Gordon Brown, and she lives in London, so she has no worries about being sued by the Malaysian government. So she's happily churning out reports and giving us data. And the Malaysian opposition has been relying on mostly her data to question the government in Parliament. Now, what happened is this: I was in Parliament that day, and in the middle of the minister explaining the 1MDB story to our question, a backbencher, a guy from the government party, stood up and suggested that maybe some members of Parliament from the opposition have been using bad information or wrong information and somehow have been shorting the ringgit down, causing great dissatisfaction in the community, in the business community, causing the ringgit to come down. And the guy has had the audacity to suggest that the Malaysian government start investigating us for economic sabotage. I mean, this happened in Parliament. I was just so surprised. The government has lost a bunch of money, billions, right? And for us, who are the critics, could get information from Sarawak Report and start questioning in Parliament. Now we could be under investigation very soon. And sure enough, after 6 days after this guy said this, Parliament session ended, Javier was arrested. And the new narrative emerged immediately that the Malaysian government believed that Javier tampered with all the documents that they supplied to Sarawak Report, and therefore it's open season on the opposition. Now this is the level that the Malaysian government operates, and you have to be there to believe, what they're willing to do. In Parliament, they passed a law called the Sedition Act. Well, they amended to the Sedition Act. They strengthened it. They passed a law to bring back indefinite detention without trial. So if you come to Malaysia and you do certain things and the government is not happy with you, they might just pick you up and throw you in jail forever. There is no recourse for any judicial review or nothing. You can't do a habeas corpus application to get any form of justice. It's like an episode in Kafka or something, a book from Kafka. You just get into there and you don't know what to do, right? Now this is a government that practices this. So this is where the issue on 1MDB, it's been revealed that 700 million went into a bank account linked to the Prime Minister. What are they willing to say now? Are they willing to say that the Asian Wall Street Journal is working with Dr. Mahathir in a political sabotage, trying to remove the Prime Minister? He claims that he's been elected democratically, but if you bring any observer of any repute, Malaysia doesn't have free and fair election. We all know that. So where will this story carry through? What we know so far, and this is a bit of a speculation, is the fact that if you want to investigate bank accounts in Malaysia, the only authority that can do that is the central bank. So a lot of us suspect that the central bank authority or someone in the central bank is the whistleblower on this particular case. And we shall see whether tomorrow there'll be a parliamentary session. I'm not hopeful of that, but there might be commotion Malaysian style in Parliament, at the gates possibly. And I've actually instructed my lawyer to be on standby because I fly back tomorrow to KL to meet me in the airport just in case. So I think that's the bit I want to talk about 1MDB.